Flight attendant Vanessa Howell just slapped 8-year-old Asian American Lily Chen across the face on the Chicago to Los Angeles flight. Surrounding passengers gasped, shocked by Vanessa's action. But nobody could have predicted what happened. Next, when a woman stood up from first class, her gaze froze the air around them. "I'm Mei Chen, president of Trans-Pacific Airlines, and I've just acquired your airline. That's my daughter." Would this split second of rage destroy Vanessa's career, or was this just the beginning of something far worse? Before we dive into this shocking story of racial discrimination and its consequences, tell us where you're watching from. If you believe in justice and accountability, hit that like button and subscribe to stay updated on more incredible true stories that will leave you speechless. Vanessa Howell was a 29-year-old flight attendant who had been working for American Sky Airlines for the past 6 years. Once a rising star in the company, her career had stalled in the last 18 months, coinciding with the airline's financial struggles and restructuring efforts. What passengers didn't see behind her professional smile was a growing resentment toward Asian colleagues and passengers. This bitterness had taken root after Vanessa was transferred from her preferred international routes when her previous branch office was downsized. The company had replaced her team with predominantly Asian staff willing to work for lower wages, a fact that Vanessa couldn't forget or forgive. Today's flight from Chicago to Los Angeles wasn't just any assignment. It was a VIP route, rumored to have important executives on board, and a chance for her to showcase her skills and potentially secure a promotion back to international flights. Everything needed to be perfect. The flight had been uneventful until they hit turbulence over Colorado. As the seatbelt sign illuminated, Vanessa moved efficiently through the cabin, ensuring everyone was properly secured. That's when she noticed the young Asian girl in seat 23C, still playing with her tablet, seatbelt unfastened. "Excuse me, your seatbelt needs to be fastened now," Vanessa said with strained politeness. The girl, Lily Chen, looked up with wide eyes but didn't move to comply. "Did you hear me? Fasten your seatbelt immediately," Vanessa repeated, louder this time. Several passengers turned to look. Lily tried to fasten the belt, but her small fingers fumbled with the metal clasp. Rather than helping, Vanessa felt her frustration rise. "We don't have time for this. Everyone else managed to follow simple instructions," she snapped. When Lily accidentally dropped the metal clasp, something in Vanessa snapped. Before she could stop herself, her hand swung forward, connecting with Lily's cheek with a crack that seemed to echo through the suddenly silent cabin. The imprint of her fingers reddened on the girl's face as tears welled in Lily's eyes. In that moment of shocked silence, Vanessa realized what she'd done, but it was too late. The cabin erupted in gasps and exclamations. A flight attendant physically assaulting a child was unheard of. But the real shock came when the elegantly dressed woman from first class appeared, her expression a terrifying combination of fury and control. Mei Chen, as she had introduced herself, didn't just announce that she was Lily's mother. She revealed that she had just completed the acquisition of American Sky Airlines. Trans-Pacific Airlines, her company, had been in secret negotiations for months, and the papers had been signed that morning. This flight was meant to be Mei's quiet introduction to her new acquisition before the public announcement. Instead, she had witnessed her daughter being assaulted by one of her new employees. "Security will escort you off the plane when we land," Mei said, her voice steel cold. "And I promise you, Ms. Howell, this is just the beginning of what you'll face for putting your hands on my child." True to her word, when the plane touched down at LAX, airport security was waiting. Vanessa was escorted off first, her uniform no longer a symbol of authority, but a mark of shame. By the time she reached the terminal, her employee badge had been deactivated. Her phone was already buzzing with notifications. Someone had recorded the incident, and it was spreading across social media like wildfire. In a matter of hours, Vanessa Howell had become the face of racial discrimination in America, her name and image attached to headlines across the country. Within 24 hours of landing at LAX, Vanessa Howell's life had imploded spectacularly. The video of her slapping 8-year-old Lily Chen had been viewed over 12 million times. Every major news network ran the story, most with the headline, "Flight Attendant Assaults Asian Child." Social media users quickly uncovered Vanessa's personal accounts, finding and sharing screenshots of past comments where she had complained about foreigners taking American jobs and Asian invasion. In the airline industry, American Sky Airlines, now publicly announced as being acquired by Trans-Pacific, issued an immediate statement condemning Vanessa's actions and confirming her termination. The apartment complex where Vanessa lived received so many threatening calls that management delivered an eviction notice citing safety concerns for other residents. Her phone rang constantly with unknown numbers, journalists seeking comments, people leaving hateful messages, even death threats. Vanessa had become, overnight, America's most hated woman. Unable to return to her apartment and with her bank account dwindling, her final paycheck withheld pending investigation, Vanessa checked into a cheap motel under her mother's maiden name. There, watching the news coverage of herself on a flickering television, she alternated between tears of self-pity and flashes of indignant anger. "They're making me out to be a monster," she whispered to the empty room. "One mistake and my entire life is over." After 3 days of hiding, with her savings nearly depleted, Vanessa made a desperate decision. She would fight back. An internet search led her to Richard Morgan, an attorney who specialized in wrongful termination cases and had a reputation for defending clients accused of racial insensitivity. His website featured testimonials from clients who claimed they had been victims of cancel culture and reverse discrimination. With nothing left to lose, Vanessa called his office and was surprised to get an appointment for that same afternoon. Richard Morgan's office was in a gleaming downtown skyscraper, a stark contrast to the motel where Vanessa had been hiding. The attorney himself was in his 50s, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, with the confident demeanor of someone used to winning. "Ms. Howell," he said, gesturing to a leather chair across from his desk. "I've been following your case with interest." Vanessa sat down, hands trembling slightly. "Can you help me? I've lost everything. My job, my home, my reputation. All because of one moment when I lost my temper." Richard leaned back, studying her. "Tell me exactly what happened on that flight." For the next 20 minutes, Vanessa recounted her version of events, emphasizing Lily's non-compliance during turbulence, the potential safety risk, and her own exhaustion from overwork due to staffing shortages. With each sentence, her narrative shifted subtly, casting herself more as the victim of circumstances than the aggressor. The girl was ignoring safety instructions that could have endangered everyone on the plane, she concluded. "What I did was wrong, but the response has been completely disproportionate." Richard nodded, making notes. "And this Mei Chen, did you know who she was before the incident?" "Of course not. I had no idea she was anyone important, let alone the new owner of the airline. The acquisition hadn't even been announced to staff." This detail seemed to interest Richard significantly. He tapped his pen against his notepad. "So you were fired, without due process, by a new owner who witnessed a personal incident involving her own child, and then used her corporate power to destroy your career, and now you're facing public harassment and threats." He smiled for the first time. "Ms. Howell, I think we have a case here, not just for wrongful termination, but potentially for defamation and emotional distress. Trans-Pacific Airlines has deep pockets, and Mei Chen made this very, very personal." Vanessa felt hope stirring for the first time in days. "You think we could win?" "I think," Richard said carefully, "that Trans-Pacific Airlines might be very interested in making this go away quietly with a substantial settlement. They've just completed a major acquisition. The last thing they need is a prolonged legal battle that could affect their stock price." By the end of the meeting, Richard had agreed to take her case on contingency. He would only get paid if they won or settled. As Vanessa left his office, she felt something she hadn't felt since stepping off that plane. Power. She wasn't going to be destroyed so easily. Mei Chen might own an airline, but Vanessa still had fight left in her. Do you think Vanessa deserves a second chance, or should she face the consequences of her actions? Comment number 1 if you believe everyone makes mistakes and deserves forgiveness, or number 2 if you think her behavior was inexcusable. Don't forget to hit that like button if you're invested in seeing how this conflict unfolds, and subscribe. to catch every twist in this incredible story of power, prejudice, and revenge. Now, with a powerful attorney on her side, could Vanessa actually turn the tables on one of the most influential businesswomen in America? Or is she just digging herself into an even deeper hole? Richard Morgan wasted no time implementing their strategy. First, he arranged for Vanessa to appear on American Morning, a conservative news program known for its skepticism toward what they called woke culture. Seated across from the sympathetic host, Vanessa projected an image of contrition mixed with quiet indignation. "I made a mistake," she admitted, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "A momentary lapse in judgment that I deeply regret. But does one mistake justify destroying someone's entire life?" The host nodded encouragingly. "Tell us about the safety concerns you were addressing." This was the angle Richard had carefully crafted, reframing the incident as a safety issue rather than a racial one. "We were experiencing severe turbulence," Vanessa explained, embellishing reality. "The seatbelt sign was on, and this child was not only unbuckled but moving around the cabin, endangering herself and potentially others. I had repeatedly asked her to sit down and fasten her seatbelt, but she ignored me." She lowered her voice. "I shouldn't have touched her, I know that. But in that moment, I was thinking about what could happen to her if the plane suddenly dropped. I reacted out of concern, not anger." It was a masterful performance that generated exactly the intended response. By that afternoon, Water Justice for Vanessa was trending, with thousands sharing their own stories of unruly passengers and thankless service jobs. Several former colleagues from American Sky came forward anonymously, claiming that staffing cuts had created impossible working conditions and that the airline had recently prioritized hiring Asian staff to appeal to the new ownership. Richard's next move was even more strategic. He filed a lawsuit against Trans-Pacific Airlines and Mei Chen personally, alleging wrongful termination, defamation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The complaint painted Vanessa as a dedicated employee with an unblemished record who had been sacrificed to appease the new CEO's personal vendetta. It claimed that Mei had used her corporate power to exact revenge, bypassing normal disciplinary procedures and deliberately inciting public hatred against Vanessa. The filing generated exactly the media attention Richard had hoped for. Business. Publications questioned whether Mei Chen's personal involvement represented a conflict of interest, while conservative commentators suggested that Vanessa was being persecuted because she was white. Most crucially, Richard found a potential witness, a businessman who had been seated near Lily and claimed the child had been misbehaving throughout the flight. James Wilson, a middle-aged investment banker, signed an affidavit stating that Lily had been disruptive and defiant, and that Vanessa had simply tried to ensure compliance with safety protocols. With the lawsuit filed and public opinion beginning to shift, Vanessa allowed herself to feel cautiously optimistic. She had moved into a small furnished apartment paid for by a sympathetic supporter who had reached out through Richard. For the first time since the incident, she ventured out in public, albeit wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap. Surprisingly, no one recognized her. Perhaps the tide was turning. Meanwhile, Mei Chen remained largely silent. Trans-Pacific's official statement was brief, indicating only that they stood by their decision and would address all claims in court. Mei herself made no public comments, focusing instead on the integration of American Sky into Trans-Pacific's operations. This silence emboldened Vanessa and Richard. "She's on the defensive," Richard assured Vanessa during their weekly strategy meeting. "She knows we have a case and she's worried about how this looks to shareholders. I'm betting we'll get a settlement offer within a month." Vanessa nodded, allowing herself to imagine the future. With a substantial settlement, she could relocate, perhaps even start her own business. She might never work in aviation again, but she could rebuild her life. Maybe this nightmare would ultimately lead to something better. "What happens next?" she asked. Richard smiled confidently. "We keep the pressure on. I've arranged another interview for you next week, this time with a podcast that reaches millions. We continue building public support while my team prepares for discovery. We'll demand all communications related to your termination, which will likely reveal that proper procedures weren't followed." He leaned back in his chair. Trust me, Vanessa. Corporations hate prolonged public battles, especially during mergers and acquisitions. Mei Chen is a businesswoman first. She'll calculate the cost of fighting us versus settling, and settling will win. Vanessa left Richard's office feeling more empowered than she had in weeks. She stopped at a cafe for her first public meal since the incident, ordering an overpriced latte and allowing herself to browse real estate listings on her phone. Maybe somewhere on the East Coast, far from California, and the memories of that fateful flight. She was so engrossed in her planning that she didn't notice the whispers at first, or the surreptitious phone cameras pointed in her direction. It was only when she looked up and saw her own face on the television mounted on the cafe wall that reality came crashing back. The Chiron read, "Breaking news. New developments in flight attendant assault case." Mei Chen had finally broken. Her silence, and from the grim expression on the news anchor's face, Vanessa knew her newfound optimism had been premature. The press conference Mei Chen called was a masterclass in corporate communication and devastating counterattack. Held in Trans-Pacific's gleaming headquarters in downtown Los Angeles, it began with a calm, measured introduction from the company's chief legal officer. Then Mei herself took the podium, elegant in a tailored navy suit, her expression composed but determined. "I had hoped to address this matter solely through appropriate legal channels," she began, her voice steady. "However, given the deliberate misinformation being spread about this incident, I feel compelled to present the truth." With that, she nodded to someone off stage, and the large screen behind her illuminated. What appeared was not the viral cell phone video that had circulated online, but crystal clear footage from multiple angles, the plane's internal security cameras. American Sky Airlines, like most major carriers, maintain security cameras throughout their aircraft, Mei explained. The following footage has been provided to law enforcement and will be entered as evidence in upcoming proceedings. The audience watched in stunned silence as the multiple camera views showed the incident in irrefutable detail. There was Lily, quietly seated, struggling with her seatbelt clasp. There was Vanessa, not helping but looming impatiently. Most damningly, there was no turbulence. The plane was flying smoothly. Other passengers weren't even looking concerned. The footage clearly showed Vanessa's growing irritation, her sharp words, and then the shocking moment when she struck Lily. Not a disciplinary tap, but a full open-handed slap that snapped the child's head to the side. Gasps echoed through the press room, but Mei wasn't finished. "In the interest of full transparency," she continued, "I would like to address claims made about my daughter's behavior and my own response." The screen changed to display internal HR documents from American Sky Airlines. Ms. Howell has suggested she had an unblemished record. These records indicate otherwise. The documents revealed multiple complaints against Vanessa over the past 18 months. For rudeness to Asian passengers, for making derogatory comments about Asian colleagues, and for 2 previous incidents of excessive force when handling passenger baggage. All had been addressed with warnings rather than formal discipline, a fact that Mei noted will be examined in our internal review of American Sky's management practices. Next came James Wilson's business card and company profile, alongside records of substantial investments he had made in companies connected to Richard Morgan's previous clients. Mr. Wilson, who has provided an affidavit supporting Ms. Howell's version of events, has financial connections to her attorney that were not disclosed, raising serious questions about witness tampering and potential legal ethics violations. The final blow came when Mei's voice softened, and she spoke not as a CEO but as a mother. "My daughter Lily is 8 years old. She was diagnosed with mild autism spectrum disorder at age 4. This flight was part of her therapy, a controlled exposure to help her manage travel anxiety. Medical records appeared briefly on screen, redacted for privacy but clearly supporting her statement. The seatbelt was challenging for her not due to defiance, but because of fine motor skill issues associated with her condition. Rather than receiving assistance, my daughter was subjected to verbal abuse and physical assault." Mei paused, visibly collecting herself. "As a mother, I am heartbroken. As CEO of Trans-Pacific Airlines, I am committed to ensuring that such behavior has no place in our company culture." The press conference concluded with two final announcements. First, Trans-Pacific was implementing mandatory enhanced sensitivity and disability awareness training for all customer-facing staff. Second, they had filed a counter-lawsuit against Vanessa Howell for assault, defamation, and filing a frivolous lawsuit, with any damages awarded to be donated to autism advocacy organizations. The impact was immediate and devastating. Within hours, justice for Vanessa was replaced by justice for Lily. Richard Morgan's office issued a terse statement that he was reviewing the new information, but by evening, news broke that he had withdrawn as Vanessa's counsel, citing irreconcilable differences regarding case strategy. His parting gift was a bill for expenses already incurred, nearly $15,000. Vanessa watched the press conference alone in her apartment, feeling the walls closing in. Her phone buzzed with a text from her landlord. Someone had spray-painted child abuser across her door, and her lease was being terminated for creating unsafe conditions. As night fell, Vanessa gathered essential belongings into a single suitcase, knowing she couldn't stay. With nowhere else to go and her meager funds now further depleted by Richard's bill, she checked into a roadside motel on the outskirts of the city, paying cash to avoid using her name. As she lay on the sagging mattress staring at water stains on the ceiling, Vanessa felt utterly defeated. The carefully constructed narrative that Richard had built had been shattered in a single afternoon. Worse, her own embellishments and lies had been exposed, making any claim to sympathy now impossible. She had become not just a villain in the public eye, but a liar as well. Sleep eluded her as she scrolled through the relentless social media condemnation. Even former supporters were now distancing themselves, claiming they had been misled by her story. The few comments still defending her came from accounts so obviously racist that their support only further damaged her image. Around 3 in the morning, desperate and alone, Vanessa found herself on a website she would never have imagined visiting before. A radical organization called Americans First, known for its xenophobic stance and particular animosity toward Asian influence in American business. They had posted a supportive message about her case, calling it evidence of the Asian corporate takeover, and offering assistance to victims of reverse discrimination. In her darkest moment, with all legitimate avenues closed, Vanessa clicked "Contact Us" and began typing her story. The headquarters of Americans First occupied the entire 10th floor of an aging office building in downtown Los Angeles. Unlike Richard Morgan's sleek corporate environment, this space had a militia-like atmosphere. American flags adorned every wall, security cameras tracked all movement, and armed guards stood at strategic points throughout the office. Vanessa, sleep-deprived and desperate, had received a response to her late-night message within hours. The organization had not only offered to help, but sent a car to collect her from the motel. Now she sat in a leather chair across from Maxwell Reed, the founder and leader of Americans First. Reed was in his 60s with silver hair and the charismatic presence of a televangelist. His tailored suit and Ivy League accent contradicted the organization's blue-collar image, but Vanessa was past noticing such inconsistencies. "Ms. Howell," Reed said, sliding a glass of water across his mahogany desk. "Your situation is precisely why our organization exists. What we're seeing is the systematic replacement of American workers with foreign interests, followed by persecution when anyone dares to speak up." Vanessa nodded eagerly. After days of being vilified, hearing someone validate her grievances felt like oxygen to a drowning woman. "They've destroyed everything," she said, voice cracking. "My career, my reputation, my home. All because of one mistake with that woman's child." Reed leaned forward. "Not a mistake, Ms. Howell. A setup." Vanessa blinked. "What do you mean?" "Think about it. Mei Chen, one of the most powerful businesswomen in Asia, happens to be on the exact flight where you're working. With her special needs child? Conveniently right after she acquires the airline, and multiple cameras capture the perfect footage?" He shook his head. "The odds are astronomical. This was planned, Ms. Howell. You were targeted as an example, a warning to all American workers who might resist the coming changes. The theory was outlandish, but in Vanessa's fragile state, it offered something her psyche desperately needed: absolution. If she was the victim of a conspiracy rather than the perpetrator of assault, Her actions became justifiable, even noble. "But why me?" she asked. "I'm nobody important." Reed smiled thinly. Random target, maximum effect. They needed a face for their narrative, and unfortunately, you fit their requirements perfectly. For the next hour, Reed outlined how Americans First could help her. They would provide legal representation through attorneys specializing in anti-discrimination, cases against American citizens. They would arrange secure housing in a building owned by a sympathetic supporter. Most importantly, they would make Vanessa the public face of their new campaign. Take Back America. "The mainstream media has abandoned you," Reed explained. "But our network reaches millions of Americans who understand what's really happening in this country. Your story, properly told, could be the catalyst for real change." Vanessa hesitated. Even in her desperate state, she recognized the extreme nature of Reed's organization. "I'm not political," she said carefully. "I just want my life back." Reed's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Ms. Howell, let me be clear. Your old life is gone. Trans-Pacific and Mei Chen have seen to that. Even if you disappeared tomorrow, changed your name, moved to another state, the internet never forgets. Your only path forward is through us." He slid a contract across the desk. "We'll cover all your expenses, provide media training, and pay you a monthly stipend of $5,000. In return, you become the spokesperson for our Asian Corporate Invasion Awareness campaign." Vanessa stared at the document, aware she was making a deal with the devil, but seeing no alternative. Her bank account was nearly empty. She had nowhere to live, and no prospective employers would touch her. With shaking hands, she signed. Within days, Vanessa Howell's transformation began. Americans First moved her into a luxury apartment in a secure building. Their media team gave her a carefully crafted new narrative, one that positioned her as a whistleblower against Asian corporate influence rather than a perpetrator of racial violence. They provided coaching on public speaking, wardrobe consultants, and a personal security detail. 3 weeks after the disastrous press conference that had destroyed her previous defense, Vanessa emerged on Patriot's Voice, a far-right streaming channel with millions of followers. Gone was the remorseful, tearful woman from her appearance with Richard Morgan. This Vanessa was polished, confident, and righteously angry. "What happened on that flight was unfortunate," she told the sympathetic host, "but it has exposed something much bigger than one incident. Americans are being systematically pushed out of our own industries by foreign interests who don't share our values or respect our rights." The interview was just the beginning. Americans First launched a sophisticated media campaign featuring Vanessa as the face of American workers under siege. Billboards appeared in Midwestern states showing her image with the slogan, "Today me, tomorrow you." A documentary titled The Silent Invasion featured Vanessa alongside other victims of Asian corporate takeovers. Appearances on podcasts and YouTube channels followed, each one reaching deeper into constituencies receptive to xenophobic messaging. For Americans First and Maxwell Reed, Vanessa was the perfect symbol, an attractive, articulate white woman who could put a sympathetic face on their agenda. She was carefully coached never to use explicitly racist language, instead speaking of cultural differences, American values, and fair competition, coded language that resonated with their target audience while maintaining plausible deniability. Vanessa, for her part, found herself embracing the role more genuinely than she had expected. The constant reinforcement from Reed's organization, the cheering crowds at events, the supportive messages from followers, all of it worked to convince her that she truly was a martyr to a greater cause rather than someone who had assaulted a child and lied about it. 6 weeks into her new role, Americans First organized their most ambitious event yet, a rally outside Trans-Pacific's Los Angeles headquarters. Thousands of supporters gathered, many carrying signs with Vanessa's face and slogans like "Stand with Vanessa" and "Americans First, Asia Last." When Vanessa took the podium, the crowd roared its approval. "They thought they could silence me," she shouted into the microphone, adrenaline coursing through her veins. "They thought they could make an example of me to frighten all of you, but they underestimated American resilience. They underestimated American strength, and they certainly underestimated me. As the crowd chanted her name, Vanessa felt something she hadn't experienced since before that fateful flight. Power. She was no longer just surviving, she was thriving in her new identity. Whatever moral qualms she might have harbored were drowned out by the validation of thousands of voices supporting her. Later that night, in a private meeting with Reed and his top lieutenants, plans were set in motion for an even larger demonstration to coincide with Trans-Pacific's upcoming shareholder meeting. What Vanessa didn't realize was that her transformation, from flight attendant to movement leader, had caught the attention of law enforcement agencies monitoring extremist groups. Her public rehabilitation might have seemed complete, but beneath the surface forces were gathering that would once again upend her precarious new life. What would you do if you were in Vanessa's position? Comment number 1 if you think she's right to fight back against what she perceives as injustice, or number 2 if you believe she's being manipulated into something dangerous. Don't forget to hit that like button if you're shocked by this dramatic turn of events, and subscribe to see how far this spiral of revenge and radicalization will go. Will Vanessa's alliance with this extremist group be her salvation, or is she just digging herself into an even deeper moral abyss? And how will Mei Chen respond to becoming the target of an organized hate campaign? The campaign against Mei Chen and Trans-Pacific Airlines escalated dramatically in the weeks following the rally. Under Maxwell Reed's direction, Americans first deployed a multi-pronged attack designed to damage both Mei's personal reputation and her company's financial standing. Their first target was Trans-Pacific's supply chain. Reed's organization hired private investigators to examine the airline's overseas operations, particularly in Southeast Asia. While they found nothing illegal, they expertly manipulated the findings to suggest impropriety. A report titled "The Hidden Costs of Trans-Pacific" was released to sympathetic media outlets, implying that the airline's maintenance facilities in Vietnam and Thailand employed underage workers. The claims were carefully worded to avoid direct libel while planting seeds of doubt in consumers' minds. Trans-Pacific issued immediate denials and invited independent auditors to inspect their facilities, but the damage was already spreading through social media. Reed followed this with a more personal attack. Using his connections to a tabloid news site, Americans first planted a story suggesting that Mei Chen had undisclosed ties to foreign government officials who had helped finance her acquisition of American Sky Airlines. The article questioned whether the deal should have received greater scrutiny from regulatory agencies, hinting at national security concerns. Though the allegations were baseless, they gained traction in certain political circles, prompting a senator known for hawkish views on China to call for an investigation. Most disturbingly, Reed assigned a team to gather intelligence on Lily Chen. "The child is her vulnerability," he told Vanessa during a strategy session. "Mei Chen portrays herself as a protective mother, but she's using her daughter as a shield. We need to challenge that narrative." Vanessa shifted uncomfortably. "What exactly are you planning?" Reed smiled. "Nothing illegal, I assure you. Just some counterintelligence to balance the story." What Reed didn't share was that he had hired private investigators to follow Lily to her school and therapy appointments. These investigators used telephoto lenses to photograph the child from a distance, particularly seeking moments when she might be having emotional difficulties. It took 3 weeks, but eventually they captured what Reed considered a winning shot. Lily having what appeared to be a meltdown in a playground, pushing another child who had approached her. The image was grainy and completely devoid of context, but in Reed's hands, it became evidence that Lily herself had behavioral issues that contradicted Mei's portrayal of events on the airplane. The photo appeared on right-wing websites with headlines like, "The Truth About Lily Chen." Was the flight attendant the real victim? And, like mother, like daughter, the Chen family's pattern of aggression. The accumulation of these attacks began to have a tangible impact. Trans-Pacific's stock price dropped 8% over 2 weeks, as the company constantly found itself playing defense against new allegations. Institutional investors started asking uncomfortable questions at briefings. The airline's customer satisfaction ratings fell as travelers wondered if the negative publicity reflected deeper problems. For Vanessa, this campaign brought complicated feelings. On one hand, she felt vindicated seeing Mei Chen face public scrutiny and criticism. On the other, The attacks on Lily crossed a line that made her increasingly uneasy. During her appearances, Vanessa carefully avoided mentioning the child directly, focusing instead on what she called Mei's abuse of corporate power and anti-American business practices. This reluctance didn't go unnoticed by Reed. After a particularly successful interview where Vanessa had artfully dodged questions about Lily, he called her into his office. "You're doing excellent work, Vanessa," he began, his tone deceptively casual. "Our supporters are connecting with your story in ways we hadn't even anticipated. But I've noticed you seem hesitant to address certain aspects of our campaign." Vanessa maintained a neutral expression. "I'm focusing on the corporate angle because that's what resonates most with audiences." Reed leaned forward. "The personal angle is equally important. The Chen girl is the linchpin of her mother's narrative. If we don't challenge that, we're fighting with one hand tied behind our back. She's 8 years old, Maxwell, and she has autism. There are lines even I won't cross." Something cold flickered in Reed's eyes. There and gone so quickly, Vanessa almost missed it. "No one is attacking a child, Vanessa. We're simply presenting facts that Mei Chen has deliberately hidden. That's called journalism." He slid a folder across the desk. "Our rally at Trans-Pacific's shareholder meeting is in 2 weeks. I need you fully committed to our message." Inside the folder was a revised speech for the rally, one that directly questioned Lily's behavior on the plane and suggested her autism diagnosis might have been exaggerated or even fabricated for sympathy. Vanessa closed the folder without commenting. "Will that be a problem?" Reed asked, watching her carefully. Vanessa thought of her luxury apartment, her restored public image, the financial security she now enjoyed, all provided by Reed and Americans First. "No problem," she said finally. "I'll deliver the message." But as she left Reed's office, Vanessa felt a growing discomfort. In her darkest moments after the incident, she had convinced herself that she was the victim, that her actions on the Thai plane had been justified. Now preparing to publicly attack a vulnerable child, those rationalizations felt increasingly hollow. That night, alone in her apartment, Vanessa opened her laptop and for the first time since joining Americans First, searched for information about autism spectrum disorder. She spent hours reading accounts from parents and medical professionals, watching videos of children like Lily navigating a world that often misunderstood them. By morning, something had shifted in Vanessa's understanding, though she wasn't yet ready to acknowledge what it meant for her role in Reed's organization. The rally was coming, and she had a decision to make, one that would determine not just her future, but potentially Lily's as well. Mei Chen had built her business empire on 3 principles: strategic patience, thorough preparation, and decisive action. While Americans First launched their public attacks, she had remained largely silent, a calculated restraint that some misinterpreted as weakness. Behind the scenes, however, Mei had assembled an elite team of cybersecurity experts, investigators, and legal strategists who were methodically building a counteroffensive. The team operated from a secure floor in Sabaidin, Trans-Pacific's headquarters, nicknamed the Situation Room by staff. Here, screens monitored Americans First's activities across platforms, analysts traced financial connections, and former intelligence professionals mapped the organization's structure. Mei's first breakthrough came when her cybersecurity team identified suspicious patterns in Americans First's online campaign. The supposedly grassroots support, thousands of social media accounts amplifying their message, showed telltale signs of coordination. Further investigation revealed that many accounts originated from the same server farms used by professional disinformation operations. "They're buying artificial engagement," Mei's head of security explained, pointing to clustering patterns on a digital map. "At least 60% of their online support isn't real people." This discovery was valuable but insufficient. Mei needed something more concrete to neutralize the threat Americans First posed to her company and her daughter. She found it through an unexpected source, a junior employee in Americans First's media department who had become increasingly uncomfortable with the organization's tactics. The employee, disturbed by plans to target a child with autism, made contact with Trans-Pacific's anonymous ethics hotline. What began as a trickle of information soon became a flood. The whistleblower provided internal emails, strategy documents, and most damaging of all, recordings of private meetings. One recording captured Maxwell Reed explicitly discussing the fabrication of evidence against Trans-Pacific. "We don't need proof," Reed could be heard saying. "We just need enough smoke to make people think there's fire." Another revealed Reed's true motivation: revenge for a business defeat. "Mei Chen outbid me for American Sky when the board chose her offer over mine. This is business, pure and simple. The racial angle just gives us better traction with our base." The most disturbing recording detailed Reed's plans for the upcoming shareholder meeting rally. It wasn't intended as merely a protest, but as a provocation designed to create violent confrontation that would damage Trans-Pacific's public image and potentially endanger Mei and Lily, who were scheduled to attend. Armed with this evidence, Mei moved decisively. First, she contacted federal authorities regarding the planned violence at the shareholder meeting. Next, her legal team prepared comprehensive lawsuits against Reed personally and Americans First as an organization, citing defamation, conspiracy, harassment, and endangerment of a minor. Most strategically, Mei reached out to legitimate business organizations and anti-extremism nonprofits to form a coalition against hate groups using economic grievances to promote racial division. 3 days before the planned rally, Mei called a press conference. Unlike her previous media appearance, this one was held in the Trans-Pacific boardroom with no advance notice to the press about its purpose. Only after journalists were seated did Mei enter, flanked by her legal team, representatives from partner organizations, and most surprisingly, 3 former members of Americans First, who had agreed to testify about the group's methods. "Today is not about defending Trans-Pacific Airlines," Mei began, her voice steady. "It's about exposing a dangerous operation that uses legitimate economic anxieties to promote division and hatred." Over the next hour, Mei methodically dismantled Americans First's campaign. She played selected recordings of Reed's private comments, displayed internal documents showing deliberate fabrication of evidence, and presented financial records revealing that Americans First was primarily funded not by grassroots donations, but by a small group of wealthy investors with financial interests competing directly with Trans-Pacific. Most powerfully, she highlighted the organization's targeting of her daughter. "As a business leader, I expect criticism and competition," Mei said, emotion briefly breaking through her composed exterior. "But when an organization hires adults to stalk and photograph an 8-year-old child with special needs, then uses manipulated images to attack that child publicly, they have crossed a line that demands response from all of us who value basic human decency." The former Americans First members then shared their experiences, describing how the organization had shifted from legitimate advocacy for American workers to increasingly extreme positions driven by Reed's personal vendettas. They confirmed that many supporters had been misled about the group's true agenda and methods. The press conference concluded with announcements that would shatter Reed's operation. Federal authorities had opened investigations into Americans First for several potential criminal violations. Major donors were publicly withdrawing support. Most immediately, a judge had granted a temporary restraining order prohibiting the organization from holding their planned rally or engaging in any activities within 500 yards of Trans-Pacific properties or employees. As media coverage of the press conference spread, the reaction was swift and devastating for Americans First. "Stand with Mei" began trending nationally, eclipsing the organization's hashtags. Business leaders across the political spectrum issued statements condemning the targeting of a child. Former supporters distanced themselves from the group, many expressing shock at the evidence presented. By evening, Americans First had canceled their rally, citing security concerns rather than acknowledging the legal prohibition. Their social media accounts fell silent, except for a brief statement claiming Mei's evidence was fabricated, a claim that few found credible, given the extensive documentation presented. At Americans First headquarters, chaos reigned. Staff members were seen leaving with personal belongings as rumors spread of imminent FBI raids. Several major funders had pulled financial support, freezing the organization's accounts. Maxwell Reed himself was nowhere to be found, having reportedly left the country on a private flight to a non-extradition territory. For Vanessa Howell, Watching the press conference alone in her apartment, the collapse of Americans First represented yet another catastrophic turning point. Not only was her latest source of support disintegrating, but the evidence presented included her active participation in planning meetings where Reed had outlined his most extreme tactics. Her face had appeared in documentation of Americans First's most controversial activities. Once again, she found herself on the wrong side of a public relations disaster, her name and image linked to an organization now revealed as promoting hatred and violence. As night fell, Vanessa received a text message from her Americans First handler. Office closed indefinitely. All programs suspended. You're on your own. Minutes later, her keycard to the secure apartment building was deactivated. By morning, she would once again be homeless, unemployed, and even more notorious than before. But this time, there would be no extremist organization offering sanctuary. She had become toxic to every potential ally, legitimate or otherwise. The collapse of Americans First left Vanessa Howell in a desperate situation far worse than her previous low points. With her bank account frozen as part of the federal investigation into the organization, she couldn't even afford another seedy motel. For 3 nights, she slept in her car, parked in different Walmart lots to avoid attention, using the store's bathrooms to maintain minimal hygiene. Her phone filled with voicemails from reporters seeking comment on her involvement with Americans First. But she had no statement to give, no story to tell that wouldn't further incriminate her. On the 4th morning, as Vanessa was washing her face in a gas station bathroom, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Not everyone has abandoned ship. Meeting at the backup location, 10 a.m., come alone. The message was signed simply M. Hope and desperation overrode caution. Vanessa knew the backup location meant a small office Americans First maintained under a shell company name, a contingency Reed had established for emergencies. When she arrived at the nondescript building in an industrial area outside the city, she found not the crowd of supporters she had irrationally hoped for, but just 3 people. Alan Drescher, Reed's head of security, Patricia Walters, the group's media strategist, and Kevin Holloway, Reed's personal assistant. "Where's Maxwell?" Vanessa asked as the door locked behind her. "Belize," Kevin said flatly. "He left with most of the operational funds. We're what's left of the inner circle." Patricia gestured to a whiteboard covered with notes. "We've been here since yesterday, working out next steps. The organization is finished, but the cause isn't, and we have one final card to play." She pointed to a file folder. "Trans-Pacific's shareholder meeting is still happening tomorrow. Mei Chen and her daughter will both be there for the publicity opportunity. Security will be tight, but not impossible to penetrate." Alan took over, his military background evident in his precise language. "Our original rally plan is dead, but we've developed an alternative operation. Smaller team, focused objective, maximum impact." Vanessa felt a chill. "What exactly are you proposing?" "Disruption," Alan said. "Not violence," he added quickly, noting her expression, "but something dramatic enough to salvage our message and force Trans-Pacific back on defense." He opened the folder to reveal blueprints of the convention center where the shareholder meeting would take place, along with security rotations and entry points. "How did you get these?" Vanessa asked. "Let's just say not everyone at Trans-Pacific supports Mei Chen's vision for the company," Patricia said with a thin smile. "We still have allies." Over the next hour, they outlined their plan. Using credentials supplied by their inside source, they would enter the convention center as catering staff. Once inside, they would separate and move into position. During Mei's keynote address, they would simultaneously reveal themselves, unfurling banners and using professional-grade sound equipment to broadcast their message before security could respond. The plan called for Vanessa, as their most recognizable face, to directly approach the stage and demand equal time to present the American workers' perspective. "It's guerrilla theater," Patricia explained, excitement in her voice. "The media will be forced to cover both sides. It reframes the narrative, from extremist group exposed to silenced American workers fight back." "And if security stops us?" Vanessa asked. "They will try," Alan acknowledged. That's part of the plan. We have body cameras to capture everything. If they use excessive force, even better for our narrative." Kevin, who had been quietly taking notes, looked up. "There's significant risk. We should be clear about that. But Maxwell has promised substantial compensation upon his return. 6 figures each, deposited in offshore accounts." Vanessa stared at the blueprints, thoughts racing. Part of her recognized the desperation and likely futility of the plan. Another part saw no alternative. Her life as she had known it was already destroyed. What did she have to lose? "What about Lily?" she asked suddenly. "Will she be near her mother during the speech?" The others exchanged glances. "Why does that matter?" Patricia asked carefully. "Because I won't do anything that might frighten or traumatize her again," Vanessa said firmly. "I'm drawing that line." Alan shrugged. "Based on the schedule, the girl will be in a separate room with other executives' children during the main presentations. Our action won't involve her." This assurance, though minimally comforting, was enough for Vanessa to tentatively agree. They spent the remainder of the day refining the plan, rehearsing their movements and preparing equipment. Patricia coached Vanessa on her statement, crafting language that would appear reasonable to mainstream viewers while still energizing their base. By evening, everything was in place for the next morning's operation. The group separated to rest before their 5 a.m. meetup, with Kevin arranging a hotel room for Vanessa using a prepaid card. Alone in the anonymous hotel room, Vanessa lay awake, replaying the events that had led her to this point. The slap that had changed everything, the escalating lies, her embrace of increasingly extreme positions to save herself. With painful clarity, she recognized how each compromise had led to a worse situation, each self-serving decision narrowing her options until this desperate plan was all that remained. Near dawn, exhausted but resolute, Vanessa made a decision. She would go through with tomorrow's plan, not because she believed in Americans First's cause anymore, but because she needed a public platform for something else entirely, something neither Reed's loyalists nor Mei Chen would expect. When her alarm sounded at 4 a.m., Vanessa dressed in the catering uniform provided by Patricia. She tucked the prepared speech into her pocket, but left behind the Americans First materials. Instead, she wrote a new statement on the hotel notepad, folded it carefully, and placed it in her other pocket. At 4:55 a.m., she met the others in the hotel parking lot. No one spoke as they loaded equipment into Alan's unmarked van and headed toward the convention center. In the pre-dawn darkness, the city seemed eerily quiet, as if holding its breath before the coming confrontation. What none of them realized was that their inside source at Trans-Pacific had been identified days earlier. Every detail of their plan had been reported to security, and Mei Chen, always 3 steps ahead, had made preparations of her own for Vanessa's arrival. Can you believe the depths Vanessa has sunk to? Comment number 1 if you think she's about to make an even bigger mistake, or number 2 if you feel she might finally be reaching a turning point. Don't forget to hit that like button if you're on the edge of your seat wondering how this dangerous confrontation will play out. Will Vanessa go through with this desperate plan, or will she find another way? And what has Mei Chen prepared for her arrival? The most shocking moments of this story are just ahead, so make sure you're subscribed. Dawn broke over Los Angeles as the convention center came to life. Security personnel in suits with earpieces positioned themselves at every entrance. Catering vans pulled up to the loading dock, where each worker's credentials were meticulously checked against a master list. Vanessa and her 3 companions joined the line of caterers, their borrowed uniforms and counterfeit badges seemingly identical to the legitimate staff. Alan went first, his military bearing and confident smile earning him quick approval. Patricia followed, then Kevin. When Vanessa stepped forward, the security guard studied her badge longer than the others, holding it under a scanner. She felt sweat beading at her hairline despite the morning chill. "All clear," the guard finally said, waving her through. The group exchanged relieved glances as they entered the service corridor. "Stick to the plan," Alan muttered. Positions by 8:30, action at precisely 9:15 during Chen's opening remarks. They separated, each heading to their designated areas. Vanessa pushed a cart of coffee urns toward the main hall, her heart hammering against her ribs. The convention center's main auditorium was already half filled with shareholders and media. At the front, a stage displayed Trans-Pacific's logo alongside screens ready to project Mei Chen's presentation. Vanessa positioned her cart near a side entrance as instructed, casually arranging cups while surveying the room. Security was heavier than expected. Personnel at every door, some openly wearing tactical gear. She spotted Alan across the room, setting up a buffet table. He caught her eye and subtly tapped his watch. 50 minutes to go. The hall continued filling with attendees. Corporate executives in expensive suits mingled with institutional investors and financial journalists. Vanessa noticed several faces she recognized from Americans First's target lists, prominent Asian American business leaders whom Reed had specifically vilified in their campaigns. Seeing them in person, engaged in ordinary business conversations, made the organization's rhetoric seem suddenly absurd. At 8:45, a side door opened, and Mei Chen entered with her executive team. Vanessa instinctively ducked behind her cart, though Mei showed no sign of recognizing her from this distance. The Trans-Pacific CEO moved through the crowd with graceful confidence, shaking hands and exchanging brief words with key shareholders. Something in her demeanor, professional yet genuinely warm, contrasted sharply with Reed's calculated charm. At 9:10, an announcement requested all attendees take their seats. The lights dimmed slightly as a Trans-Pacific executive approached the podium to introduce Mei Chen. Vanessa's earpiece crackled with Alan's voice. 5 minutes. Get to position alpha. With practiced casualness, Vanessa abandoned her cart and moved toward the predetermined spot near the stage. She could see Patricia positioning herself by the main entrance and Kevin at the audio-visual booth. Everything was proceeding according to plan, yet something felt wrong. The security personnel seemed too relaxed, their attention not focused where she expected. As Mei Chen took the stage to applause, Vanessa reached into her pocket for the folded statement she had written in the hotel room. Not the American's first talking points, but her own words. "Good morning," Mei began, her voice clear and commanding. "Before I address Trans-Pacific's quarterly performance and our integration of American Sky Airlines, I need to acknowledge the elephant in the room." She paused, her gaze sweeping the audience. "We are aware of a planned disruption at today's meeting." The room fell silent. In her earpiece, Vanessa heard Alan curse. "Abort," he hissed. "Everyone out now." But it was too late. Security personnel moved with practiced efficiency, converging on Kevin at the AV booth and Patricia by the door. Vanessa froze, watching her accomplices being quietly but firmly escorted from the room. Strangely, no one approached her. "Rather than waiting for this disruption," Mei continued, "I would like to address it directly. We believe that among the legitimate concerns about corporate consolidation and employment practices, there are voices seeking not dialogue, but division, not understanding, but hatred." She looked directly toward where Vanessa stood. "Ms. Howell, I know you're here. Would you like to join me on stage?" The invitation, broadcast through the hall's sound system, sent a shock through the audience. Heads turned, searching for the notorious former flight attendant. Vanessa stood paralyzed, her planned speech crushed in her fist. This was not how it was supposed to happen. She had expected to force her way into the conversation, not be invited into it. Security guards cleared a path from her position to the stage, neither restraining her nor rushing her. With no other option apparent, Vanessa walked slowly toward the podium, conscious of hundreds of eyes tracking her movement, dozens of phones recording her approach. As she climbed the steps to the stage, she noticed something that stopped her heart. Lily Chen, seated in the front row, not in a separate room as Alan had assured her. The girl watched her with solemn, intelligent eyes that seemed to hold no fear, only curiosity. "Ms. Howell," Mei said, extending her hand, "would you like to speak directly to our shareholders and the media present, to share what brought you here today?" Vanessa stared at the offered hand, then at the microphone. The Americans' first plan had been to create chaos, to disrupt and provoke. Instead, she was being given exactly what she had claimed to want, a platform to speak. But what would she say? The carefully crafted talking points seemed hollow now, propaganda rather than truth. With trembling fingers, she unfolded her own statement, the one she had written in the hotel at dawn. "My name is Vanessa Howell," she began, her voice unsteady. "Most of you know me as the flight attendant who slapped a child. Others know me as the spokesperson for Americans First. Neither of those identities is one I'm proud of today." Ito paused, gathering courage. "I came here planning to disrupt this meeting as part of a campaign orchestrated by Maxwell Reed. What you don't know is that I had decided to abandon that plan and use this platform differently." She looked directly at Mei. "I came to apologize, not for public relations or legal advantage, but because it's right. I was wrong to strike your daughter. I was wrong to lie about it. And I was wrong to let myself become a symbol for hatred and division to save my own reputation." The room was absolutely silent. Vanessa turned to face Lily in the front row. "I'm especially sorry to you, Lily. What I did was inexcusable, and nothing can justify it. I reacted out of impatience and prejudice, not out of concern for safety. As I later claimed, you deserved kindness and understanding, not what I did." She turned back to the audience. "I can't undo the past months or erase the damage I've done, but I can tell the truth now. Americans First is not about protecting American workers. It's about exploiting fear and resentment for power and profit. I know because I became part of it." As Vanessa continued her impromptu confession, detailing Reed's methods and motivations, security personnel quietly managed a developing situation at the back of the hall. Alan Drescher, having evaded initial capture, had returned with a concealed weapon. Before he could act, he was subdued by Trans-Pacific's security team and removed from the building. Vanessa, unaware of this narrowly averted threat, concluded her statement. "I don't expect forgiveness or understanding. I just needed to speak the truth finally, whatever the consequences." She stepped back from the microphone, expecting to be led away by security. Instead, Mei Chen approached, her expression unreadable. "Thank you for your honesty, Ms. Howell," she said, taking the podium. "Truth is always the first step toward healing." She addressed the audience. "Today was meant to be about Trans-Pacific's financial performance. Instead, we've witnessed something more valuable, a reminder that behind every headline and controversy are human beings capable of both terrible mistakes and genuine change." Turning back to Vanessa, she added, "Security will escort you to our offices. There are federal agents who wish to speak with you, but I've asked that they conduct their interview there rather than taking you into custody immediately." As promised, Vanessa was led from the stage, not in handcuffs but with dignified escort to a private conference room. Through the window, she watched Mei resume her presentation as if the extraordinary interruption had been a planned part of the agenda. Only when the door closed behind her did Vanessa realize the magnitude of what had just occurred. She had expected chaos, resistance, possibly arrest. Instead, she had been given a chance to speak truth to power, and, remarkably, power had listened. The federal agents interviewing Vanessa were not what she expected. Rather than aggressive interrogation, they conducted a methodical, almost clinical discussion of her involvement with Americans First. Their primary interest was Maxwell Reed and his financial backers, not Vanessa herself. "We've been investigating Reed's organization for 18 months, the lead agent explained. "We know you were a late addition to their operation, brought in after your public disgrace rather than as part of their core mission." For nearly 6 hours, Vanessa provided detailed information: names, dates, locations of meetings, financial arrangements, and most crucially, Reed's plans for escalating confrontations. Her testimony corroborated evidence they had already gathered from Trans-Pacific's whistleblower and their own surveillance. When the interview concluded, the agents explained her situation with surprising candor. "Ms. Howell, you've committed several prosecutable offenses, from making false statements to conspiracy. However, your voluntary testimony today and your public renunciation of Americans First are mitigating factors. We'll be making recommendations to the U.S. Attorney's Office regarding potential charges." They didn't offer immunity or specific promises, but the implication was clear. Her cooperation would be considered favorably. After the agents departed, Vanessa remained in the conference room, expecting to be transferred to custody. Instead, a Trans-Pacific attorney entered with a surprising proposition. Ms. Chen would like to offer you an alternative to immediate prosecution, the lawyer explained. She's spoken with the authorities about a deferred prosecution agreement. In exchange for your continued cooperation with investigations into Americans First and participation in a restorative justice program, criminal charges would be temporarily suspended. The terms were strict. Vanessa would need to make full public disclosure of Americans First's operations, participate in community service focused on cultural diversity and special needs education, undergo regular therapy, and agree to supervised probation. Most unusually, she would be required to work with Trans-Pacific's newly formed Ethics and Inclusion Department, providing insights on how prejudice manifests in workplace environments. Why would Mei Chen do this? Vanessa asked, bewildered. She has every reason to want me punished. The attorney's response was measured. Ms. Chen believes in transformation over retribution. She also recognizes that your insider perspective on how prejudice escalates into organized hatred could be valuable for Trans-Pacific's diversity initiatives. Vanessa asked for time to consider the offer, though her alternatives were limited. That evening, in a monitored hotel room provided by the federal authorities, she watched news coverage of the day's events. Her public confession had become the leading story, overshadowing Trans-Pacific's financial announcements. Analysts debated whether her statement represented genuine remorse or strategic calculation. Americans First was unraveling publicly, with former members distancing themselves and financial backers facing scrutiny. Early the next morning, Vanessa accepted Mei Chen's proposal. The following months unfolded in a structured routine that gradually rebuilt Vanessa's understanding of herself and the world. Mornings were spent in federal offices, providing testimony against Americans First. Afternoons involved community service at a center for children with autism spectrum disorders, an assignment that initially terrified her but gradually became meaningful. Evenings included therapy sessions and required reading on racial justice and neurodiversity. The work was emotionally demanding. Each testimony session forced Vanessa to confront her willing participation in spreading hatred. Each interaction with autistic children reminded her of her cruelty toward Lily. Each therapy session excavated deeper layers of prejudice she had never acknowledged. Physical challenges accompanied the emotional ones. Vanessa lived in court-approved housing with strict monitoring. Her bank accounts remained frozen pending legal settlements. Media outlets continued requesting interviews, which her agreement prohibited. Former colleagues from both the Airline and Americans First shunned her, the former for her original offense, the latter for her betrayal. 6 months into this regimen, Vanessa was summoned to Trans-Pacific headquarters. Expecting a routine check-in with her supervisors from the ethics department, she was surprised to be shown into Mei Chen's private office. The CEO sat behind her desk, reviewing documents. "Ms. Howell," she said, looking up, "please sit down." Vanessa perched nervously on the edge of a chair. This was their first direct interaction since the shareholder meeting. "I've been receiving reports on your progress," Mei continued. "They indicate consistent cooperation and notable development, particularly in your work at the Autism Center." Vanessa nodded, unsure how to respond. "The center's director specifically mentioned your project developing sensory-friendly practices for air travel. She believes it has potential beyond your community service requirement." "It's just ideas based on my flight experience," Vanessa said modestly. "Things that could have helped Lily and other children like her." Mei studied her thoughtfully. "That's precisely why I asked to see you. Trans-Pacific is developing a comprehensive accessibility program for passengers with special needs. Your perspective as both a former flight attendant and someone working directly with the autism community could be valuable to this initiative." Vanessa blinked in surprise. "You're offering me a job?" "A consulting position initially," Mei clarified, "with strict supervision and clear boundaries. Your criminal case remains open, and this wouldn't change your legal obligations, but it would provide structured employment and purpose beyond community service." The offer was unexpected, but not entirely surprising. Throughout her months of service, Vanessa had observed Mei Chen's management philosophy in action. Her belief that even difficult experiences could be transformed into value, both for individuals and the organization. "Why would you trust me with this?" Vanessa asked. "After everything I did to you and Lily?" Mei's expression remained professional, neither warm nor cold. "Trust is earned incrementally, Ms. Howell. You've begun that process with your consistent actions these past months. This position would have safeguards appropriate to your history. But ultimately, this isn't about trust. It's about utilizing relevant expertise to improve our services for passengers with special needs." She paused. "It's also about demonstrating that Trans-Pacific's commitment to second chances is more than rhetoric." Vanessa accepted the position, beginning work the following week in a small office within the Ethics and Inclusion Department. Her reception by Trans-Pacific employees was predictably mixed. Some colleagues, particularly those of Asian descent, maintained professional distance. Others cautiously engaged with her ideas. A few openly questioned her presence, arguing that her history made her unfit for any role in the company. The accessibility program itself advanced steadily despite these interpersonal challenges. Vanessa's suggestions for modifying pre-boarding procedures for passengers with sensory sensitivities were incorporated into training materials. Her analysis of cabin configurations identified simple modifications that could significantly improve comfort for travelers with various disabilities. By the one-year anniversary of the infamous flight, Vanessa's legal situation had evolved. The federal investigation into Americans First had resulted in multiple indictments, including charges against Maxwell Reed, who had been extradited from Belize. Vanessa's testimony had proven crucial to these cases, strengthening the deferred prosecution agreement. Most civil lawsuits against her had been settled through structured payment plans that would claim a percentage of her income for years to come. Her consulting role had expanded to part-time employment with Trans-Pacific, though still under supervision and with restrictions. On the personal front, therapy had helped Vanessa recognize the deep-seated prejudices that had influenced her actions and enabled her to be manipulated by Reed's organization. She maintained a modest apartment, lived frugally to meet her financial obligations, and had developed a small circle of acquaintances through volunteer work, though nothing approaching close friendship. It was progress measured in small increments, rather than dramatic transformations, rebuilding credibility through consistent choices rather than grand gestures. Then came the day that would test how far this progress had truly taken her. Trans-Pacific announced the official launch of their Wings for All accessibility program with a ceremony at LAX. As a key contributor to the program, Vanessa was expected to attend. What she didn't know until receiving the final agenda was that Lily Chen would be there too, participating as a youth ambassador for autism awareness. The Wings for All launch ceremony was held in a renovated Trans-Pacific terminal specially designed to showcase the airline's new accessibility features. Soft lighting replaced harsh fluorescence. Sound-dampening panels reduced the typical airport cacophony. Visual guides on the floor directed passengers to sensory-friendly waiting areas. Staff wore badges indicating training in various accommodation protocols. Media representatives and airline executives mingled with disability advocates and families selected to experience the new services firsthand. Vanessa arrived early, dressed in a conservative blue suit that deliberately avoided Trans-Pacific's corporate colors. Her role was defined as technical consultant, not featured presenter. She would remain in the background, available for specific questions, but not prominently displayed. This arrangement suited her. Despite 15 months of intensive work on the program, Vanessa harbored no illusions about her public image. The press still occasionally ran retrospectives about the slap heard round the world. Online forums still used her name as shorthand for entitled racism. Her contribution to the accessibility initiative was meaningful, but it didn't erase her past actions. As attendees gathered in the demonstration area, Vanessa positioned herself near the back, reviewing agenda notes. She was so focused on avoiding attention that she didn't immediately notice the ripple of recognition passing through the crowd as Mei Chen entered with her executive team. When Vanessa finally looked up, her breath caught. Walking beside Mei, dressed in a yellow dress with butterfly patterns, was Lily. The girl had grown taller in the past 18 months, her features more defined. She moved with the slight hesitancy characteristic of many children on the autism spectrum, staying close to her mother, but engaging with her surroundings. Despite extensive work with autistic children at the community center, Vanessa had never prepared herself for this moment. She had assumed Mei would keep Lily far from any event where she might be present. The sight of the child she had harmed, the catalyst for her life's implosion and subsequent reconstruction, sent Vanessa retreating behind a display panel, suddenly unable to face the ceremony she had helped create. A Trans-Pacific coordinator found her there, clipboard clutched to her chest, breathing too quickly. "Ms. Howell, they're asking for you in the technical briefing area. The demonstrations are about to begin." "I can't," Vanessa whispered. "Lily is here. I didn't know she would be here." The coordinator looked confused. "Yes, she's our junior ambassador. It was in the final program sent yesterday." She hesitated, noting Vanessa's distress. "Should I tell them you're not feeling well?" The question pulled Vanessa back from the edge of panic. After everything, the public disgrace, the months with Americans First, the federal investigations, the community service, the therapy, the gradual professional rehabilitation, would she still run away when actually faced with the consequences of her actions? "No," she said finally. "I'll be right there. I just need a minute." When Vanessa joined the technical team, she kept her focus strictly professional. The demonstration proceeded smoothly, with staff showing how new pre-boarding procedures accommodated passengers with sensory processing challenges. Visual communication cards, noise-canceling headphone availability, and dedicated quiet spaces were highlighted as program innovations. Throughout the presentation, Vanessa maintained studiedly natural behavior while hyper-aware of Lily's presence in the front row. The girl seemed genuinely interested in the demonstration, occasionally whispering questions to her mother. She showed no signs of recognizing Vanessa, who had changed significantly in appearance since their encounter. Her formerly highlighted blonde hair, now its natural brown, her makeup minimal, her posture less commanding. The formal program concluded with Mei Chen announcing Trans-Pacific's commitment to expanding the initiative across all their routes within 18 months. As attendees moved to the reception area for refreshments, Vanessa began quietly gathering her materials, planning a discreet exit. "Ms. Howell." The voice froze her in place. Mei Chen stood a few feet away, Lily slightly behind her. "A moment, please." Vanessa nodded mutely, unable to form words. "Lily has something she would like to give you," Mei said, her tone professional but not cold. The girl stepped forward, holding a folded paper. She offered it without making eye contact, a common trait among children on the spectrum. "Thank you for making planes better for kids like me," she said, clearly reciting practiced words. Vanessa accepted the paper with trembling hands. "You're very welcome, Lily," she managed to reply. The girl retreated immediately to her mother's side. "My daughter has been working with the accessibility team for 6 months, Mei explained. When she learned about your contributions to the sensory guides, she wanted to acknowledge them." Vanessa carefully unfolded the paper. It contained a child's drawing of an airplane with specialized features labeled in neat handwriting. Quiet zone, picture cards, special headphones. In the corner was written, "Thank you from Lily C." It was a simple gesture, clearly encouraged by adults working with the girl, yet profoundly affecting. Vanessa looked up, struggling to maintain composure. "I never expected. Thank you for allowing her to participate in the program." Mei's expression remained measured. Lily's involvement serves multiple purposes. It provides valuable perspective from a user with actual sensory processing challenges. It helps her develop social skills through structured interaction. And it demonstrates our commitment to inclusion at all levels of our organization. She paused, including those with complicated histories. The implication was clear. Lily's participation, and this interaction, was both practical and symbolic. Just as the girl was learning to navigate challenging social situations, Trans-Pacific was modeling how to incorporate rehabilitation and reconciliation into its corporate practice. "The program wouldn't exist without your experience," Mei continued. both your professional knowledge and your personal journey, that deserves acknowledgement despite our history." Vanessa swallowed hard. "I still don't understand why you've given me these opportunities. Most people in your position would have pursued maximum punishment." Mei considered this. "Punishment alone seldom creates value, Ms. Howell. Your skills and insights, properly directed, have helped create a program that will benefit thousands of passengers." She glanced at Lily, who was examining a display of communication cards, with intense focus. Besides, holding on to anger requires energy better invested elsewhere. Before Vanessa could respond, they were interrupted by a Trans-Pacific executive needing Mei's attention for an important media interview. With a brief nod of farewell, the CEO departed, guiding Lily gently with her. Left alone, Vanessa carefully refolded the drawing and placed it in her portfolio. The encounter had lasted barely 2 minutes but represented a milestone she had never expected to reach. Direct acknowledgement from the Chen family that her efforts toward rehabilitation had meaning. That evening, Vanessa received an email from Trans-Pacific's HR department. The message was brief but significant. Her status was being upgraded from consultant to regular employee, with the title Accessibility Program Specialist. The probationary tag that had marked her position since joining the company had been removed. The salary remained modest, the restrictions on media contact still applied, and her legal obligations continued unchanged. But the implied message was clear. Her transition from notorious public figure to functional professional had reached a new plateau. As Vanessa absorbed this development, she reflected on the long, painful journey from that moment of lost control on the airplane. She had experienced public vilification, embraced extremism as a defense mechanism, participated in organized hatred, and finally confronted the depth of her own prejudice. The cost had been enormous: financial security, professional reputation, personal relationships. Yet somehow, through a combination of others' unexpected grace and her own halting efforts at redemption, she had found her way to this unexpected place. Not forgiven exactly, but allowed to contribute meaningfully despite her history. Vanessa pinned Lily's drawing above her desk, not as a trophy of reconciliation, but as a daily reminder of both consequence and possibility. The girl had moved forward from trauma to contribution. Perhaps in their different ways, they both were, learning to navigate a world more complex than either had initially understood. 3 years after the incident that defined her life, Vanessa Howell stood backstage at Trans-Pacific's corporate headquarters, reviewing her presentation notes one final time. The company was hosting a transportation industry conference on inclusive design, featuring the now award-winning Wings for All program as its centerpiece. As program development lead, Vanessa would deliver the keynote address to executives from airlines, rail services, and cruise lines eager to implement similar initiatives. Her rehabilitation had progressed steadily, if not spectacularly. The federal investigation into Americans First had concluded, with Maxwell Reed and several co-conspirators receiving substantial sentences for financial crimes and inciting violence. Vanessa's testimony had proven crucial to these convictions, and her deferred prosecution agreement had transitioned to probation with community service requirements. Professionally, she had found unexpected fulfillment in accessibility work, discovering that her airline experience combined with hard-earned empathy created valuable expertise. Her role had expanded to include developing training protocols for flight crews and consulting on cabin design modifications. The media occasionally still referenced her past, but increasingly as context rather than focus. Former flight attendant Vanessa Howell, known for a 2022 incident involving discriminatory behavior, now leads industry-recognized accessibility initiatives. Personally, Vanessa lived modestly. Most of her income still went toward legal settlements and restitution payments. She maintained limited social connections, primarily through professional contacts and volunteer work. Dating remained complicated by her notorious history, which inevitably emerged in internet searches. She had learned to live with these limitations, finding meaning in work, rather than seeking to reclaim the life she had lost. As Vanessa made final preparations for her presentation, she noticed increased activity at the auditorium entrance. Mei Chen had arrived with Trans-Pacific's executive team for the opening session. Beside her walked Lily, now 11 years old. more poised than the child of 3 years ago, but still showing the characteristic traits of autism spectrum disorder in her movements and interactions. Seeing them still triggered complex emotions. For Vanessa, remorse for her past actions, gratitude for the unexpected second chance, and persistent awareness of the harm she had caused. She and Mei maintained a strictly professional relationship, interacting when necessary, but never discussing personal matters. They had reached a functional equilibrium that acknowledged history without being defined by it. The conference host approached, clipboard in hand. 5 minutes, Ms. Howell. We're running slightly ahead of schedule. Vanessa nodded, gathering her materials. I'll be ready. As she moved toward the stage entrance, an unexpected figure appeared in her path. Lily Chen, apparently separated from her mother in the pre-conference bustle. The girl held a tablet, which she offered to Vanessa without preamble. I made improvements to your sensory map, she said, her direct communication style typical of many on the autism spectrum. The colors were too bright in version 3. I fixed it. Vanessa looked at the screen, seeing the digital wayfinding tool she had developed for airports, modified with more muted color coding. This is excellent, Lily, she said carefully. The contrast is much better. Would you mind if we incorporated your changes? Lily nodded matter-of-factly. That's why I made them. Mom said you're speaking about the program today, and I wanted it to be right. There was no fear in her manner, no lingering trauma from their first encounter. For Lily, pragmatic, collaboration had apparently superseded difficult history, a perspective Vanessa found both humbling and instructive. Before Vanessa could respond further, Mei appeared, slightly breathless from searching for her daughter. Lily, you need to stay with me in crowds, she said, then noticed the tablet. Ah, you showed Ms. Howell your revisions. The sensory map is better now, Lily stated confidently. I helped fix it. Mei placed a gentle hand on her daughter's shoulder. Yes, you did. That's excellent collaboration. She looked at Vanessa. We should take our seats. I believe you're about to be introduced. As they turned to leave, Lily spontaneously handed the tablet to Vanessa. You can use this version for your talk. It has my notes. Then, with the direct sincerity characteristic of many autistic children, she added, You were mean before, but you're not mean now. That's good. Before either adult could respond to this startlingly straightforward assessment, the conference host returned. Ms. Howell, they're ready for you. Vanessa found herself walking onto the stage, still processing Lily's words, the tablet clutched in her hands. As she reached the podium and faced the audience of industry professionals, she set aside her prepared notes and instead held up Lily's tablet. I'd like to begin by sharing something that happened just moments ago, she said into the microphone. The most important stakeholder in our accessibility program just handed me this revised design with a simple evaluation. You were mean before, but you're not mean now. That's good. A ripple of surprised laughter moved through the audience. That stakeholder is Lily Chen, who happens to be both on the autism spectrum and the daughter of our CEO. She's also the child I physically assaulted 3 years ago in an inexcusable act of discrimination that many of you may remember. The room fell silent. I'm starting with this uncomfortable truth because it's inseparable from the program I'm here to present. Wings for All exists partly because of that terrible moment. A moment when I failed completely to understand, accommodate, or respect a child with different needs. Vanessa looked directly at Mei and Lily seated in the front row. What I couldn't comprehend then was that true inclusion isn't about tolerance or special treatment. It's about designing systems that work for everyone, recognizing that accessibility benefits all users, not just those with identified needs. She held up the tablet again. And as Lily just demonstrated, the best solutions come from directly involving the people we're designing for as collaborators, not treating them as problems to be solved. For the next 40 minutes, Vanessa delivered a presentation that wove technical details about the program with honest reflection on the journey that had created it. She didn't minimize her past actions or present herself as heroically redeemed. Instead, she offered their experience as evidence that individual and organizational transformation, while painful and imperfect, was possible when accountability was coupled with opportunity for meaningful contribution. As she concluded, Vanessa found herself making an unplanned addition. "Someone recently asked if I regret what happened 3 years ago," she said, her voice steady. "I regret my actions every day, the harm I caused, the hatred I enabled, the division I deepened. But I'm profoundly grateful for what those terrible choices ultimately taught me." She looked again at Lily, who was examining a small fidget toy with intense concentration, apparently uninterested in the adult conversation around her. "I learned that our worst moments don't have to define us permanently if we're willing to face them honestly. I learned that meaningful redemption comes through creating value for others, not just seeking forgiveness for ourselves. And most importantly," she added, "I learned that sometimes the most powerful evaluation comes in the simplest terms. You were mean before, but you're not mean now. That's good." The applause that followed was respectful rather than enthusiastic, appropriate for a presentation that had acknowledged difficulty rather than celebrated triumph. As Vanessa left the stage, she passed Mei Chen, who was preparing to deliver the next address. Their eyes met briefly, and Mei gave a small, professional nod. Not friendship or forgiveness, but acknowledgement of a shared commitment to building something worthwhile from painful beginnings. It was enough. Vanessa took her seat in the far audience, placing Lily's tablet carefully on her lap. The hateful woman who had struck a child in a moment of prejudice and impatience no longer existed. Neither did the defensive figure who had embraced extremism to avoid accountability, nor the broken person who had finally confronted her own failings. In their place was someone more humble, more thoughtful, and ultimately more useful. Not because she had been forgiven, but because she had been allowed to contribute despite being unforgiven. It wasn't a fairy tale ending with neat resolution. It was something messier but ultimately more valuable. Evidence that even the worst human impulses could, with sufficient effort and opportunity, be redirected toward creating systems that worked better for everyone. As Mei began speaking about Trans-Pacific's broader commitment to inclusive design, Vanessa found herself thinking of Lily's disarmingly simple assessment. "You were mean before, but you're not mean now." Perhaps that was as much redemption as anyone could reasonably hope for. Not erasing the past, but building something better in its wake. This story of Vanessa Howell's journey teaches us several profound lessons about human nature and redemption. First, it demonstrates how quickly prejudice can escalate from a momentary lapse in judgment to embracing hateful ideologies when we refuse to take responsibility for our actions. Vanessa's spiral began with a single impulsive act, but deepened as she sought to justify rather than acknowledge her mistake. Second, it highlights how vulnerable we all are to manipulation when desperate. Americans First didn't create Vanessa's prejudice, but they expertly exploited it, showing how extremist groups transform personal grievances into organized hatred. Third, the story illustrates that true redemption isn't found in forgiveness or wiping the slate clean. Rather, it comes through acknowledging harm done, accepting consequences, and channeling energy toward creating value for others. Vanessa's rehabilitation wasn't about escaping punishment, but about redirecting her skills toward meaningful contribution. Perhaps most importantly, this narrative reminds us that systems often work better for everyone when designed with the most vulnerable in mind. The accessibility program that emerged from this painful history benefited all passengers, not just those with identified needs. A powerful metaphor for how addressing discrimination creates more functional societies for everyone. Real change is rarely dramatic or complete. It happens in small increments of daily choice and consistent effort, not grand gestures or perfect transformations. As Lily simply put it, "You were mean before, but you're not mean now." That's good. What moment in this story resonated most with you? Was it Vanessa's initial mistake, her manipulation by Americans First, Mei's decision to offer rehabilitation rather than just punishment, or Lily's straightforward assessment at the end? Comment below with the part that struck you deepest and why. Have you ever witnessed someone make a genuine transformation after doing something harmful? Or have you experienced your own journey of accountability and change? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you believe in the power of redemption through meaningful contribution rather than just punishment, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more stories that explore complex human journeys and the possibility of change even after terrible mistakes. Thank you for watching this difficult but important story. May we all find the courage to face our prejudices honestly and the wisdom to build something better in their wake.